Hi, I'm Circe Olson-Wessner, the director of the Museum of the American Military Family located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is our podcast, Host Nation Hospitality.
Hi, I'm Karin Tramm, Director of Education for the museum. We have a great podcast planned for today. We're joined by my friend and colleague, Lauralee Ciranni. Hi, Lauralee.
Hi, Karen. Good to see you again. And hi, Circe. It's nice to meet you. Thank you
Hi.
for inviting me to your podcast.
Great. Well, there's so many ways we could take this, so many directions we could take this podcast. And of course, with technology, you never know what's going to freeze or anything, but it might be an exciting day just like that. So there are, like I said, directions. So Laura Lee is a military brat, a spouse, a military spouse, a parent, a teacher for DoDEA. DoDEA. See, we're having a bad day already. But Karen and I talked about what we were going to call this, and we decided to choose Host Nation Hospitality because our Host Nation Hospitality exhibit is currently traveling around Germany, and we are in the 80th anniversary of VE Day today, and lots of stuff going on in the world. And so Host Nation Hospitality seemed to be the best fit for this podcast. So I'm just going to jump in with some questions. Laura Lee, I know that you and Karen met while you were teachers in Vicenza, Italy. What grade did you teach? I know Karen mentioned something called Sure Start. So is that a class?
It's a program. It's considered a program. It's for at-risk students. So the first 2 years that I was at Vicenza Elementary, I taught Sure Start. And it's DoDEA's version of the Head Start program. So they start with families have to apply to get in. And they start with, there's a series of points that they give the parents for different risk factors. So if they were teen parents, they start with E4s and below. They look at how many other siblings are in the house, if English is a second language. So it's basically to give these kids a good start to their formal education. It incorporates the parents. There's a required volunteer
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
component to it, and then it also incorporates the community. So it really is the whole village.
That's really cool. Is that are the classes then really small or are they the same?
They can be up to 18. And
Okay.
as if unlike a regular classroom, if a student leaves in the middle of the year, in a kindergarten classroom, maybe you'll get a new student if someone new PCS is in, but it's not a guarantee. In Sure Start, there's almost always a waiting list. So as soon as one student leaves,
Mm.
you're getting another students because we try to help as many students as possible. Now, my understanding is at this point, because Dodds has gone to universal preschool,
Hmm.
that the Sure Start program is only available in, I just read in Germany, Ansbach and Wiesbaden.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Interesting. Okay. Um,
and then after teaching Sure Start for those 2 years, and I was reassigned to kindergarten. So I was sad about leaving Sure Start, but very excited to work with the wonderful kindergarten team, which included Karen Tramp.
I guess I really should have, we already had kind of a technical glitch. I guess I should back up. You were both military family members stationed in Vicenza, or were you the sponsors? I'm not sure.
I was the sponsor by, yeah, yes, the Vicenza Elementary School was my last assignment as a DoDEA teacher. And I believe, Karen, you were the sponsor as well, right? By the time we moved to.
True. For both Lauralee and I, my husband's retired Navy, Lauralee's husband's retired Air Force, and they were both retired. He was on his way to retiring when I got to Vicenza. We were stationed in Rhoda, and he had to finish up his tour duty there. I moved with the kids to Vicenza and was there for a few months until he got there. And then later he became a teacher, but I was the sponsor, same as Lauralee.
Okay. Um, were you guys both in Vicenza during the COVID pandemic?
Yes, we were. Yes, we were.
Um, I remember early on seeing images of the Italian hospitals during the pandemic. It seemed like they were kind of first in this. What did your families experience? And I guess more questions. What did the military tell you about the pandemic? Did you feel like you were getting good information and support? Were you winging it? Who just tell us about the pandemic in Italy.
Well, I feel like the military was keeping us up to date
Best they could.
as best they could. But it did begin in Italy. And funny story, I had been in the United States at a family wedding
Mm-hmm.
and heard this news as I was getting ready to go back to Italy. And talking about this, at that time, they didn't know it was a pandemic. They were just starting, it was just the very, very start of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, oh, I'm going to go back to Italy and I don't have to go into school the next day. I get a little bit of time to get over my jet lag. Got back to Italy. And I think while I was en route, got a message from somebody, one of the kindergarten team saying, we're going to have a meeting at this time on this day. I think it was the Wednesday after I got back. So instead of having my week to recuperate, we went right into, okay, this is what's happening. So all the schools came into Vicenza, the multipurpose room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were told, this is what we know. Am I right, Karen? This is what we know. And for right now, we're going to be going to remote learning.
Here's some lesson plans for online learning for the next 2 days and for the next week, just in case we don't come back to school.
Wow. Well, Karen, I know you wrote a really cool book called 100 Days Smart about teaching kindergarten from home, and I now I know Lauralee did too, teach from home, and I was wondering what was the hardest thing about teaching kindergarten on Zoom? I mean, how did you keep the kids' attention? I mean, it must have been pretty chaotic.
Laura, you want to run with that one?
I'm not sure. Chaotic. I think the hardest part about it was just the initial start because we didn't know this was going to be for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when we started, we didn't have Google Meet. We didn't have any of the Google other than Gmail. We didn't have all of the other components of Google open to us. So we were trying to post plans and trying to make them comparable to what we were doing in the classroom. And then, of course, we had the whole, anytime you're working with technology, the whole connectivity thing. We'd get a sunspot or you have a student in a rural area or
Yeah.
Data, yeah, all that. And the thing was for me, I really didn't, I would say a technology toddler. I did not know that much about teaching virtually that way because really for kindergarten, we're hands-on teachers. You know, what they get from us is FaceTime, and I mean FaceTime like my real face, hands-on learning. That's how they learn best. And honestly, I didn't do a lot of technology in my classroom for that reason, because I feel like my kids deserve to see me. They have enough screen time in their life anyway. So once we had to start using our technology resources, that was really challenging for me. And I would say that was more challenging than trying to keep the kids engaged once I did figure it out, because I think that they were so anxious to have that sense of community and to be together as a group that they were good on the computer. What I will say is the very first most important thing we had to do was teach them how to mute, because they want to talk to each other, which is so normal with kindergartners. So once we taught them how to mute, and also once we learned how to mute them, if they unmuted themselves, and in certain cases, we had to eject them from the meeting.
Wait, stop right there. Why would you eject a kid from...
If they couldn't control themselves, or if something was going on in the background of their meeting that might not have been appropriate, or, whatever, we could eject them, and then they could come back later. And that did happen from time to time. And I just kind of missed the eject button once we were back face to face, I have to say, and mute.
You didn't hold the remote up in front of the kid in the class and go, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's just some interesting things that happened, and we were back face to face right away after the summer when all the schools in the states were going remote or staying remote. We were back in the classroom. That's a whole different book.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I remember reading that in Stars and Stripes. I was shocked that you guys were already back, but that was interesting. So did your experiences growing up as a brat or as a military spouse or anything like that, did any of that help you navigate the uncertainty of the pandemic? Were you able to relate to any of your experiences as, a military kid or as a military spouse dealing with uncertainty? And did that help you with your own kids or your own students? Did it keep you calm because you knew you were resilient or what?
To a certain extent, I think my experience as a military brat, as a military spouse, helped in that the uncertainty, sometimes not knowing what was happening from day to day, week to week.
Mm-hmm.
That piece of it was familiar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The isolation, the not being able to take my dog to the park, to take my dog even outside of my courtyard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That part, I'm not sure anything could have prepared us or prepared me for that.
Right. This is a question I just thought of popping into my head. So, I don't know if your spouses were working during this time, but did they have to go into work or were they also home with you during the pandemic?
So my husband he was transition assistance program. He ran the workshops.
Mm-mm,
And so he was working from home. So he worked upstairs, I worked downstairs.
mm-mm, mm-mm.
He had the same thing. He was teaching physics at the high school. So he worked from the office upstairs and I taught kindergarten in the kitchen. That was what I renamed my newsletter, kindergarten in the kitchen, because yeah. And then we were both drawing off the, same data, and we had all of those technology issues that, okay, it's going to run out today. Let's set up hotspots beforehand so we're ready to go when the data runs out, and then we'll have to figure out what to do to there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, interesting. Did the Italian government also, did you use any information? I know that in we used we were in New Mexico at the time and then we were in Hawaii, but I depended heavily on what the health department in New Mexico and in Hawaii was saying, supplemented by what Bill learned from his job. Did you guys also get a lot of information from the Italian health department or the Italian news, what to do or?
The base, that's part of why our information was changing so quickly, because the base
Mm-hmm.
was giving us information based on what the Italian government
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was giving them
Uh,
And sometimes it changed really fast.
really fast.
We had to have special paperwork to be on the road, and we were allowed to go to the grocery store, but only one person at a time in the car. We were allowed to go to work if we needed it, and we were allowed to go to the doctor. And if we were in the car or even walking the dog or out for whatever reason, we had to have our passport with us. We had to have a special paperwork that was sent out by the Italian government stating your reason for being out there. And the paperwork changed so fast. We got called down to the office before we were sent home that day. And they had emailed us I can't remember what it was called, whatever that paperwork was. By the time we got to the office from the classroom, it had changed. They said, throw that out, get you a new one. And things happened very quickly. So the base really tried to keep us informed.
mm-hmm.
They did job. They took their information from the Italians and then they added their own layer that would be, what applied to our community, what to do in the commissary, what to do here, what to do there. And then they said, if there's any difference between our rules and their rules, you go by the stricter ones. So I feel like the base kept us pretty informed. They used the Italian information as best they could, and we just tried to they would translate for us. Sometimes by the time it got translated, like I said, it was obsolete. So it was just moving parts, a lot.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, that's the first I'd heard how it was in Italy. That's cool. Well, Karen, what do you think? Any other?
So, Lauralee, I want to back up a little bit, or not back up, but talk a little bit about your life as because when we first had this conversation, I was just so impressed by all of the different hats that you wore as a brat, as a spouse, and as a mom. And she told me this great story about when your family was in Pakistan, and you said that you were too young to remember that, but you had family stories that had been told over the years. So I was hoping you might tell us a little bit about that, and then a little bit more about just your life as brat.
So actually, after I read the script, I went back and I found the letter my mom wrote
Mm.
from 1965, because every year she would send out a Christmas letter with our adventures. So I was only 18 months when we went to Pakistan, so I don't remember a lot from the assignment. One of the few things I do remember is climbing into my younger sister's crib when the air raid siren sounded. And I vaguely remember going into the bomb shelters at night. But I do remember my mother often told this story. While we were in Pakistan, we were evacuated to Kermasel, Turkey, after the Indo-Pakistan War broke out. And from reading this letter, I just found out that my parents had actually finished their 2-year assignment and had just started a 10-month extension that my father had requested. And this war broke out just after that extension started. So in the letter, my mom says we did not know how much this extension was going to affect us. So in September, the war broke out. And then my mom was 8 months pregnant with baby number 9 when the order for the dependents to evacuate was issued. So she often talked about the trip from Peshawar to Karamsel. I remember her talking about C-130, getting on the C-130. But the trip actually included an 8-hour bus trip of all the dependents on a military bus through the Khyber Pass to Kabul, a flight on a C-130 from Kabul to Tehran, Iran. It stopped there, I guess, to refuel and then went on to Istanbul, Turkey. And then once in Turkey, we were paraded onto another bus, which then drove us to the ferry for this ride across the sea to Kermasel. And then there was a 6-hour bus ride once we got off the ferry to Kermasel, where we were put up in the barracks, in the dormitories. But my mother said they kept assuring her on the plane that they were ready to deliver the baby if she needed to. And her response was, I will wait. I will wait. And she did. Baby number 9 was not born until the end of October. So
Wow. So your dad was not with you? It was
my dad was not with us.
your mom had to do this with 9 kids. How old was the oldest kid?
So the oldest was 9, 10.
So she had a little help, but not much.
But not much.
And just had to coordinate you on buses and planes and makes us with just like 2 kids feel really wimpy. So 9 kids and I know you're obviously not the oldest. So are you an upper middle or a lower middle? You're not the baby because you have a sister, younger.
So, and it was 9 kids then.
Uh-huh.
The total count is 12.
Wow.
And I am number 7.
Oh, so you did crawl back up into the middle.
Yes, I'm a middle child.
Wow. How did your mom and dad manage all of you guys? Like, were you guys really super organized? What was a typical day like?
I would say that my mom did a lot of the managing. I mean, my father was military, so he was busy with his job and was TDY often. And so the managing happened by my very organized mom. We had a routine.
Mm-mm.
We all had, as soon as we were able to, we all had age appropriate chores.
Mm.
The older ones looked out for the younger ones. And she, quite honestly, when I look at it now as a mother of two, I am flabbergasted, amazed. Because like you said,
Mm.
sometimes it just seemed overwhelming with two.
Right.
But she made it look easy. She made it look easy. And I don't think our routine was any different from any other typical family. I mean, we got up, we ate breakfast, everything was ready to go the night before for school, so we could just pick up our backpack and go. There were just a lot more of us to organize, but our routine was pretty much the same. And there definitely was a routine.
Wow. How many boys, how many girls?
We're 6 and 6.
Couldn't plan that any better.
Yeah.
That's even organized. Look at that, you know.
So Lauralee, what did your dad do in the military? And
He
how long?
was in the intelligence community. He was an intelligence officer. So I don't ever really know what he did. He always worked in offices without windows, and you had special codes to get in. I remember as a high school student going up to his office after an after-school activity, trying to watch people as they came and go, trying to figure out what the code was to get into the building.
Did that
But
succeed? Did you succeed at figuring it out?
no, we did not.
You know, I've never been in my husband's office after he got to a certain level in his job. I haven't seen any of his offices like for the last 4 or 5 assignments. So yeah, I know the secret stuff, I guess.
Tell us a little bit about your mom. What was she like?
Well, I told you the story about I told you the story about Karin and that kind of encompasses who my mom was. Um, she was small but mighty. She stood about 4'11", very petite, but she loved the adventures that the military life offered. In fact, my father says that he never would have stayed in the military had it not been for my mom persuading him, because she liked the travel opportunities. She just liked it all. I think she kind of even liked the idea of, yeah, he was TDY and she might have been with all these children. It kind of gave her that sense of independence too, where she ran the household. And I guess another story I have that kind of tells about my mom's personality is she wanted to travel. So we lived overseas. We were going to travel. We camped because obviously when traveling with 10 people, you weren't staying in hotels. So we had a VW van. And then I guess when we were in Germany, when we were in Frankfurt, my dad bought a pop-up trailer,
Mm.
tent. And when it was time to go, most of the things were kept in the trailer, but when it was time to go, we were usually on the road for between 2 and 3 weeks, because we usually saw a few countries each summer. And she would give us, I don't know if they still have them, but remember the milk, the cardboard milk cartons or the cases that
Boxes.
milk would
Yeah,
come in.
yeah. With
My
two.
mom would give each of us one of those and say, pack for the trip.
Oh,
And I'm not sure she ever checked what we had in those boxes. She just hoped it was appropriate, and if not, and she would load those all up into the trailer and we would be on our way. And it wasn't until we moved back to the States, my father retired. There were just the younger 4 living at home, and they were taking a trip in the summer. And she was talking about these hotels, and I think they did drive, but basically they each had half of a seat on a car, unlike those of us who traveled in the van were all squeezed in. And I said, "What's this about a hotel? You're not camping?" She looked at me and she says, "I hate camping." She said, "I have always hated camping." I said, "Mom," and her response was, "It was the only way we were going to travel. And if we were living overseas, I was going to see the world." But
That's
I never knew until 20 years later that she despised camping.
wow. You know, you mentioning those milk cartons. I mean the milk, they're milk boxes. They were square.
Mhm.
That's brilliant though. Give each kid a box and tell them that's what you have for the trip. That's pretty cool. My mother used to get those at the commissary for me, and I made those into bookshelves. So I had all my books. I was the kid that had all these books in these little boxes. I had them organized by, I don't know, color or whatever. But yeah, I remember them, but I hadn't thought about them till you mentioned them. So, so you mentioned that you were stationed in, well, lived in Pakistan and then Frankfurt. Where else were you stationed? And did you have a favorite place or a least favorite place?
So we were, all of our stateside assignments were in Maryland. My father worked at NSA at Fort Meade. So we always came back to Maryland. But so after Frankfurt, we came back to Maryland for 2 years. And then we went to Munich.
Mm.
And I would have to say Munich was probably my favorite assignment. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was a teenager at that time.
Mm.
And so we went over there. I was turned 13 the day we flew over there. I turned 13 and I left when we were 16. And with the public transportation, there was a lot of freedom I certainly would not have had here
Mm.
in Maryland. Um, and my parents really liked the assignment too. So it was just, I guess it was just a really fun place to be as we close to the Alps.
Mm.
Uh,
So as a high school student there, what kind of things stand out to you going to high school in Munich?
I'm not sure I should share some of the things. But there were just, the school was not on the Caserne. So it was within walking distance. So I just remember walking to and from there. When we first got to Munich, the PX was downtown on Prinzregentenstrasse in this old German building. It was 3 floors. And I think we lived in government leased housing. So we were away from the Caserne, but close to the PX. And I think probably the first or second day that we were in our house, my mom says, "Hey, let's go on the Strassenbahn. Let's find our way to the PX." So just being able to get on the streetcar and just go and do that. And once we found our way with parents, then we were just allowed to kind of go on our own. At the school, I think the travel that we did for sports events, we were always, each season we were in some kind of sport. We played some kind of sport. So just the traveling we did there to Bad Tolz, to Augsburg, to a lot of places that are no longer opened, but um, just how much fun those trips were. There was a dance, it was called DYA at that time, now CYS.
Mm.
Um, they had a dance every Saturday night for the teens. So we would go and we would meet there. Sometimes we would stay at the dance. Sometimes we would go to somebody's house. A bus would come to and from our neighborhood. Sometimes we missed curfew. We just got on the the Strassenbahn or the S-Bahn and made our way home. And of course, that was before cell phones. And
But did father sit up and wait?
no, mother sat up and waited. We had a
Ah.
little room in our So we were in a fourplex and we had two of the fourplexes
Mm.
because nobody had been living in the other one for the first 6 months. So my father said, "Hey, can we have this?" So they cut a door through our two,
Oh, nice.
but it wasn't there for the first 3 or 4 months. So the four oldest were in that house
Ah.
pretty much by ourselves. Um, but anyway, my mother had a little room. She had that she would sit in the little study that she would sit in, and it was right off of the front door. So you had to go through her and say, report in. She might have been half asleep when you got there, but she asked her 20 questions. And as soon as she knew everybody was safe, then she went upstairs to her bedroom. But meanwhile, Dad was asleep in the bed.
That's pretty cool. Did you have either a Mr. Akamoto or Mr. Butler as your teachers?
I think Mr. Okamoto was an art teacher. I did not have him. I remember the name. I did have Mr. Butler.
Uh-huh.
He was my PE teacher and my basketball coach.
Right.
Um, and I remember him being just he was a fun PE teacher. The year before, I had had a PE teacher that we did a lot of calisthenics, and she never let us play things like basketball or wasn't feminine. So Mr. Butler allowed us to do all those team sports, and I believe he was really active in both the German and the American community as well. So
Yeah, he and my dad were good friends because I guess he lived in Karlsruhe for a while. But my dad and he used to play basketball. They had this league called the Complacent Teachers Association. They would
okay,
it was like a group of teachers, and then they would go and play like the GIs,
okay,
those leagues, the soldiers had their own like intramural leagues. Um, in any way, Mr. Butler's still alive. He's in his 90s. I was just down in Munich not too long ago, and I saw a movie, playing because we had an exhibit down there with a German historian. And I was looking, that man looks familiar. And that's Ernie Butler. And they said, yeah, he's still alive. He lives
oh,
in Munich. Yeah. And Mr. Akamoto was what photography. He also was at the University of Maryland too, and
okay.
took a class with him. Not very well. I don't remember keeping the class. I wasn't very good in, f-stops and, all the stuff you have to do to become a good photographer. That wasn't my thing. Um, so what do you think do you think your education in the DoDEA system was better or on par with any school you went to in the States? What'd you think? Why not?
So when I went back from Munich,
Mhm.
we were sent to the Catholic school
Mhm.
in Laurel, Maryland, and I was a junior at the time. And I would say my education in the Dodd system was certainly on par with.
Mhm.
I was exactly where I needed to be
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
I went to that school. I never felt I never felt particularly challenged. I mean, I took the classes.
Mhm.
I actually think at that time, Dodds may have required more. I had enough credits by the time I finished my junior year to graduate.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So a lot of my classes my senior year were classes I wanted to take.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I graduated from Karlsruhe High School. I was 16 when I graduated high school and went off to the University of Maryland in Munich. When were you in Munich?
it's a hard question.
Maybe we were there at the same time. I doubt it though.
We went over in 75, in August of 75, and returned in August of 78.
So I just got to Munich at 79. So yeah, but I would have been about the same age you were, you know. It's like you
It's
were
funny when I taught in Logis,
uh-huh.
my son's honors English teacher. I found out that she was actually in Munich at the same time I was in Munich. And I had heard her sister was younger than I was, but I had heard her sister's name. I had never heard, and I can't even think of the teacher's name. That's terrible. But I hadn't heard her name. I think she was a year or two older than I am.
It's
Have
interesting.
you going to the Dodge school influenced you to be a teacher, or especially a teacher in the Dodge system later?
I knew when I went to college that I was either going to be in the military or a teacher. And if I was going to teach, my ultimate goal was to get into DOTS. I wanted to live overseas. Because I very much enjoyed my life as a military brat.
You know, it's funny because I mean, you're not the only brat I've heard say that. There seem to be a lot of brats who either join the military or go into federal service. So is that true in your family? So we know you were a teacher and then you went to work for DoDEA. Did any of your siblings join the military or go into teaching or
I have several siblings who are teachers. Now, both my mother and my father after he retired from the military, he became a teacher. My mother, after she sent the last one to daycare, went on and got her master's degree in library science. So she worked in education. My oldest sister is a teacher. My youngest brother is a teacher. I guess it's all of us that are teachers. My son is a teacher.
Mm.
And I have one brother who joined the military.
Only one out of
Only
all?
one brother who joined the military.
Yeah, I have a friend who's like one of 12 kids too, and I think 10 of them joined the military.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like some crazy amount, but they just, it's what Mary Edwards Wirch says, it's in the blood. It's a culture thing, it's your culture. Um, Karen, I know one of your sons was in the Peace Corps in Thailand, and while its mission sounds like it's totally opposite of the military, it can be really dangerous too. And so, why did he go into the Peace Corps, and was he ever in harm's way?
So what Lauralee just said about being a brat and being a third culture kid, we're all familiar with that. He wanted the overseas adventure. So was raised overseas. He did come back to the States to go to school. And when he graduated, he felt that draw again. And he was raised in Europe. So he said, okay, I'm going to go to Asia because I want to do something new that I haven't done yet. So he went into the Peace Corps and he went to Thailand. As far as being in harm's way, I will say it's not like being in the military. I'm not going to even try to compare it to that. I was worried about poisonous snakes and centipedes and him being bit by dogs. He did get bit by stray dogs a few times, had to go to Bangkok and get rabies shots. Those kind of things, those worried me. And then, of course, COVID was the biggest thing because when the pandemic happened, he was evacuated and we were in Italy. He couldn't come home. And that was just a whole nother challenge there, trying to get help for him and figure out what to do with him when he was in the States and didn't have anywhere to go. He did finally land on his feet. He went out to Oregon and worked for Peace Corps again in a joint project with FEMA doing vaccine outreach.
Mm-hmm.
And that was finished. He is back in Thailand now, not with the Peace Corps. He works as a teacher in a private prep school, a Thai school. He works with Thai students who are anticipating going to a university, an English-speaking university. So he's out of the Peace Corps, he's back in Thailand, and now the things I worry about are air pollution and earthquakes. Moms always worry about something, you know?
Yeah, well, that's part of our DNA. We have to worry. It's interesting. So your kids, teachers and following in footsteps. Both of my parents were teachers too, and I swore as a kid I was never going to be a teacher. But here I am. I've taught everything from kindergarten to adult education now, and I'm even teaching conversational English here 2 nights a week in Germany. So, what do they say about apples and oranges or apples? No, apples don't fall far from the tree or something.
Oh, apples don't fall far from the nut tree, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Let's shift gears a little bit, Lauralee, because we talked about your experiences as a brat. What about your experiences as a military spouse? So tell us how you met your husband, Chuck.
So I went into Dodds as a single person in 1990. I was hired and assigned to Bushel Elementary School. And it was a small K-5 school for the dependents who were stationed at Bushel Air Base. And Bushel Air Base it's a German base with a small American detachment.
Where is it? Where's Busel?
Bushel, it's in the Trier area. Bitburg is its support base.
Okay. Okay.
So the students in middle school and high school went to Bitburg. So I met him. We actually met at the community center where there's a /bar/church/ it was a small, I said the Americans had a small detachment there. So the community center was the place where everything happened. So he was sitting at the bar and I was taking an exercise class in a
adjacent room.
and at one point he made his move. Oh, there was, I guess after exercise class, I went to the bar and had something to eat. So he came over and talked to me. And here we are.
That's cool.
How many years later?
32. We just celebrated 32 years.
Wow, congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what branch? I got lost. Was it Air Force?
He was in the Air Force. Yes, he was in the Air Force.
And
he, unfortunately, I did not have such exciting assignments with my husband. He was in munitions, and because of his career field, we were very limited where we could go. So when we got married, about 6 months after we met, he was reassigned to Griffiths Air Force Base in Rome, New York. His father had died just before we met, and so he had asked for a humanitarian to be close to his mother, who was in Rochester. So he ended up in Griffiths Air Force Base. And we were there, I'm not sure. Well, our son was born there. And then he took us to Minot, North Dakota.
oh. So you went from snow to snow.
Yes, yes. That tends to be where
Munitions are kept.
his career field takes us to places where there is either extreme snow or extreme heat. But his last assignment was in Spangdahlem. So originally, he was assigned to go back to Bushel. In our fun military moment, our household goods were on the truck. And he gets a call saying, oh, that assignment is no longer available. Somebody on the base had made rank. And so they were taking the position that Chuck would have been going to fill.
Wow.
But our things are on the truck. And so Chuck went in and he did some digging and he found this assignment in Spangdahlem.
Okay. Just keep going, truck.
Called somebody up and he says, the things are on our household goods are on the truck. The truck is getting ready to leave. Well, we'll see what we can do. So he got a call the next day. Would you be willing to go to Spangdahlem? And he came and he asked me. I said, you have to ask. Our things are on their way. they were going to the same spot anyway because Spangdahlem and Bitburg were the support bases for Buchel. So Spangdahlem was actually closer, but the high school was at Bitburg. So that's where the kids went to school.
That's funny.
Yeah, so that was our last assignment in the military was Spangdahlem.
Well, that's cool. So I've often wondered how different it is to be a military spouse during different eras. So your mom was in the 70s, 60s and 70s, I'm assuming, or 70s and 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you, of course, more recently. Um, so when I interviewed a World War II wife, she told me some real doozies of stories, but there were a lot of common experiences. They always had one commander's wife who did this, and there was always this crazy experience. And so the more things change, it seemed to me, compared to what her life was like as a military wife in the 40s and mine in the 80s and 90s, the more they stay the same. And so when you look back at your mom's life as a military spouse, and then compare it to your experience, do you see a lot of similarities and differences, or what?
I think yes and no.
Mhm.
My husband I didn't necessarily have to worry about him being deployed because he was in the nuclear world. So we were hoping that he wasn't ever going to be deployed. So I didn't necessarily have that worry hanging over my head. But he was gone a lot. He had regular TDYs. He
Mhm.
worked long days. So a lot of those, like my mother, and I think a lot of dependent spouses, a lot of the day-to-day household tasks and organizing the routines, organizing the children kind of fell to me. Um, my mother was very, very much involved in like with the military spouses group.
Mhm. Mhm.
I had, in Minot, I had a very good group of women friends. I had ran a toddler gym.
Mhm.
And so we would get together and just we would have our Saturday nights out, but we did the toddler gym each week. So I had a very close group of friends, but I think because my husband worked such long hours there, do a lot of we didn't do a lot of things with the military community as a couple.
Mhm. 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 All right.
But yeah, I think there's always that similarity because you're a spouse, you're away from home, and you have this connection with the other spouses and
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
you kind of build your own community
Yeah.
wherever
Yeah.
you are, right?
Yeah. Hmm. Well, I know moving is consistent in the military. Your mom moved a lot, and you already mentioned like where you'd lived. Did you find that moving changed any? Like when your mom was, did she do a lot more of the packing up, or did were you more hands-on, or was it about the same? Just the whole moving process.
I think that was about the same. Yeah, I think that was about the same. I think I think another thing my mother and I very much shared is, back when we were dependent spouses,
Mhm.
if you went in and you wanted to do something and your husband wasn't there, well, where's your husband? You can't do this until your husband's. So that frustration of having to do a lot of things by ourselves because our spouses were at work or they were TDY, but not being able to because it had been a last minute TDY or we weren't expecting them to work late. And we didn't have that power of attorney saying, you can do this. um, but yes, I think the moving, I think was the same, other than the fact that she was moving a lot more, organizing a move for a lot more people,
Right, right.
kind of getting things organized. Where do we want this to go? Where do we want this to go? Giving the kids their backpacks and saying, okay, pack up what you think you'll want to for the plane ride. And
Yeah. So Karen, you've had your fair share of moves too. So
Yeah.
I can't remember. Are you a military kid too? No.
No,
No.
I never left the States until I went to work in Guam after I graduated college. That was my first time out of the state,
Oh, that would be a quite a culture shock. Where in the States?
Florida.
Florida. Well, at least you had the temperature about the same.
Right, right. That was the beginning of, lots of moves for me. I think 13 maybe as a teacher and a military spouse. Was
Wow.
Yeah, but all of them good. I feel like all of them have their highlights and their challenges.
Well, so going back to Lauralee a little bit, if you were going to describe each one of your your duty stations, because you only had a few, what would you say? Give one single word per duty station. Like what sticks in your mind? Like snow, but you can't use snow now because I used it.
Or, or as a military spouse?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say New York, the closest we ever lived to family.
Mm-hmm.
North Dakota, cold, long winters.
Yeah.
Um, and Germany, home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having lived there as a child and then being there for almost 9 years as an adult, or actually 9 years with my children, and then 2 years as a single person. So yes.
So Karen, what about you? Why don't you give I'm putting you on the spot. So like think about it like Guam. What would you describe that in a single word or a super short?
Well, I was there twice. So the first time I would say coming of age because it was my first time teaching and my first time being out of the country. And I just did a lot of growing up there and I loved it. It was a special time in my life. I still have friends from that time. For sure, it was growing up, coming of age for me for Guam. Yeah.
Okay. What
And then
else?
I was in the Philippines after that. And that I would just say wonder. Hey, I loved being there. And that's where I met my husband too. So that was a good tour. Germany, I was just there for 1 year, cloudy the whole time I was there.
Cloudy today.
And then I went to Naples, and Naples, I would say chaos.
Mm.
I love living in Naples. It's vibrant and vivacious, but it's chaotic. We went back to Guam after that, and I love Guam. I,
Mm.
a word for that, I don't know what it would be. Happy
Calm.
place.
It would be calm after Naples.
All right.
Yeah.
After that, we were back in Monterey for 2 years before I had my kids. So I would say Monterey is family, where
Mm.
we started family. We went to Iceland, and I would say pristine. My gosh, that was a challenging place, but gorgeous. After that, we were in Virginia, and Gene was deployed during that time, and that was we were close to family again. That was why we were there because we knew he was going to deploy. Went to Spain. Oh, I love Spain too. Olé, that's my word for Spain. The area and learning to dance the Sevillana and just the culture and living by the sun, not the clock. Love Spain. And then we were in Vicenza for 16 years. And for me, I would say, besides Florida, that's home because that's the place we really raised our kids. They went to school there. They just that's that place has still has my heart.
Well, both of you get really excited when you talk about these different moves, and I do too. I love moving. I love moving. I love packing. I love setting up the house, all that good stuff. And it never occurred to me that my kids may not have enjoyed the moving as much as I did. I'm like, hey, kids, we're going to move. Hey, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be great. And, you never really stopped and said, how do you feel about this, kid? Maybe I wasn't the greatest mom, but I was wondering, how did you get your kids prepared for each move? What was your process about getting them excited? Because I just was assuming they were excited. So, what did you guys do?
The first time we moved, when we moved from New York to North Dakota, our son was one. Not a whole lot of preparation.
Yeah, that's
And he was an amazing traveler. We went to visit my husband's mother in Rochester, and then we went down to Maryland and visited my family. And then we had two cars, so I took my oldest sister along with me, and we drove all the way out to Minot, North Dakota. And he was an amazing traveler. Yeah. It was in his, he was just born, ready to go. And then the next time we moved, when we moved from Minot to Germany, the kids were 3 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So our daughter Alexandra she was really too young to remember anything. I remember Anthony asking questions, and we took out the map and showed him where we were going. And of course, we were excited because as far as Chuck and I were concerned, we were going back home.
Mm-hmm.
So we were excited. Oh, and we can all about all the castles and things that we could show him.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, giving them their backpacks and saying, okay, we're going to go to grandma's house and then we'll see Nana. And so we need some things for when you're in the car, and you need some things from we need to keep some toys out, and we'll ship this box separately. And just what books do you want to bring with you? So kind of including them in the move and in the packing out as much as was age appropriate. And probably the hardest move for them was when we went from Spangdahlem to Lodges. But even then, they were excited. A lot of their good friends had already PCS'd.
Mm-hmm.
They were both in transitional places. Anthony he did high school. Both of my kids started and finished high school in Lodges. So they were ready to go. And all of us were just kind of, where is this? And just trying to find out as much about it. So all of us were trying to do research.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
figure out.
Lodges is the Azores?
Lodges is the Azores, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And Karen, you had a lot of experience moving kids.
Mine were young in the beginning too, and really I felt like Spain was the first time that I worked with them and said, hey, we're going to go to this place. We did a little language training. I tried to teach them some just basic Spanish, some colors and numbers. We used to play Spud, the game with the Volkswagen. So you get a certain color and you get points with that. And if you could say it in Spanish, you get double points, stuff like that. This is the teacher.
Yeah.
So once we got to Spain, I have to tell you this funny story. We took the boys to a park, and there's some little Spanish kids they're playing with, and I'm so happy. And they asked my young son Will what his name was, and I think I know Will didn't understand because he thought they asked how old he was, so he said Cinco, and I was so proud that he remembered that number, but they thought that was his name, and they thought that was funny, and all day long they called him Cinco while they were playing in the park. But it made me happy that he did remember some of that little language training. So I that was my way of preparing them for that move. And then when we went to Italy from Spain, that happened quickly. We did not know. We thought we were moving back to the States, and this opportunity came up for me to be the sponsor and for Jean to retire. It happened fast. So we had actually taken the boys to Italy on a vacation. Because we didn't know when we'd ever get back there, and we loved living in Naples, and we wanted to show them Italy. So we went and spent spring break there, and then they loved it. And we spent a lot of time in Rome and Naples and more southern. We made it to Florence, and they really wanted to go to Venice. And I said, we just don't have time. I'm sorry, that's going to be another trip. And then a year later, we live there. So they were excited to go back. They loved, they were like, oh, we're going to get to eat gelato every day and pizza. And, traveling there on vacation is a lot different than living there. But living there still was, a great opportunity, and they were excited for it.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So actually, I was just gonna say today's the 80th anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. And I was just wondering, you lived in Germany, you lived in Italy, you lived in the Azores. you lived in the Philippines, all these different places that also participated in World War II. When you lived overseas, did you ever go to any of these ceremonies? Like all over the world, they're having commemorations today, in England, even in Germany, here in Stuttgart, there's a joint church service with the Stuttgart military and the German. Did you guys go to any ceremonies or military host nation kind of events around World War II or anything?
So the Italians celebrate Liberation Day a little bit different, on a different time than we do. Their Liberation Day is April, it's the 25th of April, and that's more to mark the liberation of the Americans getting the Germans, liberating the Italians from the Germans that had moved down there after D-Day. Anyway, that's their big celebration day. It's in April, and they would have parades. I know there's a big one over in Verona. I did not attend it, but I know a little bit about it. And on Guam, their Liberation Day is actually in July. Is that right? July. Yes. It's in July, and that was when the Americans came in and liberated Guam from the Japanese. There's a lot of stories on Guam that were tragic, things that I didn't really learn about in school. And that's our history too. I did not know that much about it until I got out there, but they also celebrate in the same way. They have parades and a lot of fiestas and things like that. So I think, different countries, like you said, they have different dates and timelines, but they're all celebrating peace.
Peace, yeah, yeah. What about you, Lauralee?
I don't recall ever attending. I know in Vicenza, um, there was always a parade and they had the Alpini down there. So it was always a host nation holiday, obviously, and we lived close to downtown. So I do believe I may have walked upon a celebration at the end of the parade, but just that's what I remember is the Alpini, all of the Alpini with their little hats and
What's
their
an alpini?
they're the soldiers from the mountain soldiers.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
they're a huge group. It's uh, people who have served in the military, who have fought in various wars from, I think, from World War II or World War One
Mm-hmm.
to
All the way.
present day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they still train up there in the mountains. They train. I had an Italian friend who served in the Alpini, and he said that part of their training was to get donkeys up over the mountains because that was the only way that they could move things in some parts of that rugged terrain. I thought that was interesting.
That's cool. Well, you hear stories, not donkeys. I'm going on a totally different tangent, but when we lived in Puerto Rico, we had a hurricane come through and there was no power or anything for like 6 weeks. And we get so used to it. The military had to bring in generators and things like that just to survive. And, they had to figure out how to do it old school. So I imagine knowing how to get things on donkey back, you get spoiled and you'd say, oh, we're always going to have a Jeep to carry stuff, but obviously not always. And so it's good to have these, you can go back to the old fashioned way of doing things. Um, so I was going to talk about deployments, but are we running out of time? We have been just chattering upon ourselves for a long time. So I think we should probably wrap up. Because we could talk for another 4 hours. Because Lauralee, you and I have some more things in common that I have figured out just listening to you, but that would be another podcast for another day. Um, and so I'm going to play a game with you. I'm going to play a quick free association game. I did this with Karen her first time interviewing her. So, I'm going to let you, Karen, ask the questions.
Okay, so
Okay.
here we're going to be quick. So, Lordly, where's your favorite place to vacation?
I have thought about this question a lot. I cannot name just one place.
It's hard, isn't it?
I can't name just one place.
Okay, you can name two.
But probably one we did every year when our kids were little was Austria. We would go skiing in Austria either New Year's week or Christmas week. So Austria.
So what about the most unusual food that you've ever eaten?
Lutefisk. And believe it or not, it's a boiled fish that they have in Sweden. But believe it or not, I didn't taste it in Sweden. I tasted it at the Scandinavian Festival in Minot, North
Why
Dakota.
not? I was going to say it had to be in North Dakota. My dad is Swedish, and he has all sorts of not so nice jokes about lutefisk. So something about the board is tastier than the fish or something. Yeah, you're
It will
making
not be eaten again.
okay. All right, go ahead.
Hard question for me. What's your favorite museum?
This was a hard question, but one that always kept coming into my head as I was thinking about it was the Rodin Museum in Paris.
Oh, that's
Just
sculpture, right?
the sculpture, yes. And it was just the thinker. That's the first thing you see when you go up to the museum. And I recall the grounds. I mean, I went there way back in the 80s, and I just recall the grounds being absolutely beautiful too. It was just a place I want to go back to and have not yet been back to.
That's a great thing going back to a museum.
Yes.
When time passes, learned more about that artist. You have seen other things that help you make connections. So going back to museums more than one time, that's one of my favorite things too. It's like reading a book again time.
Yes.
Okay. Most adventurous mode of travel you've ever taken. And don't say my car.
So again, I think as far as travel goes, I pretty much stuck to traditional bikes, cars, planes, trains, and ferries. However, as I thought about this question, I was thinking flying in and out of lodges could be pretty adventurous.
Oh, I do.
Because the flight line wasn't huge. We were on the island was 12 by 18. And the winds were often 60, 65 miles an hour. So flying in and out of there was pretty adventurous, especially if you were on a C-130 or a C-5. Sometimes they had to circle around 2 or 3 times before they got that angle just right.
Oh,
So I think that qualifies. That's
yeah.
and I'm scared.
I'm not a flyer. I don't like flying, so yuck. Okay.
Okay, and so Lauralee, and this is also a hard one for me. One place that's on your list that you haven't been to that you want to go. You haven't been there yet.
Again, there are numerous countries I could put on this list. But I have never been to Asia. So I would like to spend some time in Asia, in particular Thailand and India.
Okay. Well, I think next time we do an interview, Karen, I want to play because I haven't played yet, and I'm not sure I know any answers to any of these questions too. But we have to end this interview today. Now we can plan a second interview at some other point. As always, I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to tune in and to let everyone know that this podcast has been brought to you by the Museum of the American Military Family and Learning Center. And our podcasts are supported in part by New Mexico Arts, the New Mexico Humanities Council, Sandia Area Credit Union, and organizations like Military Brats Seal and Military Brats Registry. And I wanted to thank our guests. It's fun to have like more people on an interview. It's a lot of fun. So thanks, Karin and Lauralee, for joining me today. It's been great. Thanks, everybody.
So thank you for having me. I'm excited to co-host it with you I don't know if I'm a host or a guest, but whatever I am, I appreciate it. And I want to thank listeners and supporters of the Museum of the American Military Family.
Well, very cool.
And thank you both. It was nice to meet you, Circe, and good to see you again, Karin, and fun to share my stories.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. It was awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
So we went off because we had ended this podcast and we were just talking a little bit and debriefing. And we were talking about how it's the conclave right now in Rome. And Karin had something interesting to say. And I thought, oh, we should have gotten that on the podcast. So we're back. So
Okay, so what I wanted to say about that was when we did take our kids to Italy to visit, because we didn't think we'd ever be living there again, we went to Rome, and it was during the conclave, and they had closed the airspace around Rome. So the airport was closed, and we had to fly into Pescara, which is over on the other coast, and take a bus over to Rome. And when we got there, of course, we want to go to St. Peter's and see what was going on there. And so we were able just to walk in. I think that was even before the time that they had all of the, now they have the metal detectors and the x-ray machines and all, but I think then was still the time when you could just walk in. But anyway, there were pilgrims from all over the world there, and we saw nuns with every different color habit on. We saw and every different color skin. But what I remember most was the nuns with the tattooed faces, because I still don't know where they were from, but it was just so beautiful seeing all of those different people come together in this one place at this one time. It was really fascinating to see that. And we did see black smoke. We weren't there for the white smoke, but just being there during that time and people coming up and talking to you about who you thought would be the Pope. My husband's tall and blonde, lightheaded, and someone came up and asked him if he was with the Ratzinger delegation, and he's like, "No, I'm American." They thought he was German, but anyway, quite a very, very interesting time to be there.
And so which Pope was it then that was this Benedict then?
Yes, Ratzinger became Benedict. I don't know when. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and then Lauralee had an even more incredible story. So go ahead.
But I didn't know this when I didn't recognize the name Ratzinger, but when this Pope was elected, my father informed my sister and I that he was the one who had officiated at our confirmation. Because we were born and raised in the Catholic Church, and we were in Munich at the time of our confirmation.
That is incredible.
And so apparently, I guess he would have been an archbishop at that time.
Wow. Okay. Well, since you wait until after I've not asked anything to drop all these awesome stories, is there anything else in history going on right now that would fit into this podcast? We've got the end of World War II, we've got the Pope, we've got I don't know, anything else that we should talk about, or should we really sign off this time?
I don't have anything else that pops in my mind right now, but I can keep on it, and I'll start making a list for next time. Whenever I travel, I always have a next time list of things that I want to do when I go there, and I'm going to make a next time list for you, Circe.
Okay, great. Well, this is Host Nation Hospitality, so we love to talk about our relationships with people from other countries and our experiences living overseas. So I appreciate your coming back on after we signed off, and I think this is going to be a great podcast enriched by the wonderful experiences that you guys had. And so I just wanted to thank everybody again for hanging in there with us. And also I should probably thank our sponsors again. That's New Mexico Arts, the New Mexico Humanities Council, Sandia Area Credit Union, and Military Brat Seal and Military Brats Registry. Without them and their support, and especially New Mexico Humanities and New Mexico Arts, this podcast would not be possible. So thank you again, ladies. And now we're really signing off. So arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Yeah.
Bye.